Hello, and welcome to today's story. My name is Philip, and I like to dive deep into scary Asian stories and cover them in my videos. If you have an interesting story you want me to cover, let me know in the comments. I always read all comments. For now, let's get into today's story, where we have a few terrifying stories to share. One of them takes us into the mountains of Yamanashi, Japan, to a place locals refuse to drive through after dark. It's known simply as Tunnel 9, an abandoned stretch of mountain road that was sealed off decades ago, after what officials described as a tragic accident. But those who've been there at night say the air inside the tunnel feels wrong. The silence isn't empty, it listens back. In 2019, a group of university students decided to live stream their late-night visit for fun. They laughed as they walked through the darkness, flashlights flickering on cracked concrete walls, still stained with soot from the crash years ago. But halfway in, something changed. The signal began to distort. A child's faint laughter echoed from somewhere deep inside. Seconds later, their camera caught a blinding flash, and the live stream cut to black. What happened next would shock the entire region. The story begins with a small group of university friends from Tokyo, eager to capture something thrilling for their online audience. It was the summer of 2019, and urban exploration videos were trending everywhere. Ghost hunts, abandoned schools, tunnels, forgotten shrines. The darker and more forbidden the place, the more views it drew. Among them was a communications student named Daisuke, quiet but deeply curious, the kind of person who liked to test limits for the sake of a good story. He'd heard about Tunnel 9 from an online forum dedicated to Japan's haunted locations. A narrow, concrete throat carved into the mountains of Yamanashi, sealed off decades ago after a fatal bus accident that had taken the lives of several school children. Locals said the government closed it because the structure had become unstable, but others whispered a different reason, that something unnatural had remained after the crash. The legend claimed that on quiet nights, you could still hear the sound of the children's laughter echoing from inside, followed by the faint screech of tires and a single scream that never faded. Most drivers took the long detour around the mountain rather than risk glancing at the sealed entrance. Daisuke thought it would make the perfect live exploration. He convinced 3 friends to come along: Haruka, who handled the camera; Riku, the loud one who always cracked jokes; and Kana, who was hesitant from the start. She didn't like the idea of visiting a place connected to children's deaths, but Daisuke brushed it off. "It's just a tunnel," he said, smiling, "and we'll be out in an hour." The drive from Tokyo took nearly 3 hours. The road wound through endless forest, the trees growing denser as they climbed higher. By the time they reached the outskirts of Yamanashi, night had fallen completely. The headlights sliced through mist, so thick it looked like smoke. The GPS showed a thin gray line snaking into the mountains, ending at a spot simply marked as Route 19 closed. That was it. No name. No warning. Just a narrow asphalt road, swallowed by darkness. When they finally reached the barricade, the temperature dropped sharply. It was early summer, yet the air felt like late winter. The friends parked their car just outside the old metal gate, where a rusted sign leaned sideways. Most of the letters had peeled away, but one line remained legible: "Keep out. Danger of collapse." Riku laughed. "Perfect," he said, holding up the phone for the live stream. "Let's see if the ghosts show up." The camera light flicked on, washing the tunnel entrance in pale white glow. The inside looked endless. A black corridor lined with damp concrete and streaked with mold, as if the mountain itself had been bleeding. Daisuke took the first step in. His shoes scraped against gravel, and the echo came back louder than it should have. The others followed, their flashlights cutting through the heavy air. The deeper they went, the more distorted the sound became, footsteps doubling back, whispers overlapping. Haruka adjusted the camera's focus, muttering that the signal was starting to flicker. Behind them, the night forest was silent. No insects, no wind. Just the faint hum of the live broadcast trying to hold connection. The tunnel smelled of wet stone and old metal, a strange scent that carried the weight of decades. Their viewers sent comments flooding in, "So creepy. I heard something. Turn around." But Daisuke barely read them. He was staring at a dark stain on the wall ahead, the shape disturbingly similar to a small handprint. "Probably from the workers," Kena whispered, trying to sound calm, but her voice trembled. The others laughed nervously, brushing it off. They kept walking deeper, unaware that the entrance behind them had faded completely from sight. The tunnel swallowed everything, the light, the sound, and soon, even their sense of direction. At that moment, the camera caught something strange at the far end, a faint flicker of movement, too fast to define. Daisuke paused, squinting into the darkness. "What was that?" Haruka asked, her voice echoing softly. No one answered. The air grew colder, and from somewhere deep inside Tunnel 9, a faint, rhythmic sound began to echo like the rolling of distant wheels over asphalt. The rhythmic sound grew louder, steady, and deliberate, like an approaching vehicle that never seemed to arrive. The tunnel, though long and curved, was supposed to be sealed at the far end. There was no way anything could drive through. Yet the noise kept echoing toward them, soft at first, then distinct enough that each of them could tell it was the roll of tires over cracked concrete. Haruka raised the camera, trying to catch the sound. "It's coming from ahead," she said. The livestream chat began exploding with messages. "Is that a car? You guys aren't alone. Turn back." Daisuke hesitated, his flashlight beam cutting through dust particles floating like ash. The air felt thicker now, heavy in his lungs. He turned toward Kana. "Maybe it's just an echo from the outside." Kana didn't answer. She was staring straight ahead, frozen. "Listen carefully," she whispered. "It's not one car. It's several." And she was right. Beneath the louder rolling sound came smaller, quicker rhythms, the tap of footsteps, dozens of them, in sync like a group marching through water. It lasted for only a few seconds before fading into silence again, leaving behind a low, humming noise that almost sounded like a child's voice humming a tune. Riku broke the tension with a shaky laugh. "Creepy sound effects. Nice touch, Daisuke." But Daisuke wasn't smiling anymore. He raised the camera light higher, revealing streaks along the tunnel walls, black marks, long and smeared, curving upward like skid trails. Haruka zoomed in. "Those look like tire marks," she muttered. "But they're on the wall," Kana whispered. "That doesn't make sense." They walked closer, examining the marks. The concrete was cracked and uneven, and small pieces of burnt rubber were embedded in it. The air smelled faintly of oil and something metallic like dried blood. The live stream connection flickered again. Haruka frowned at her phone. The screen pixelated, then froze on an image of their own faces distorted into static. She tried refreshing, but the connection refused to stabilize. "Signal's dying," she said. "We might need to head back." But Daisuke didn't move. His curiosity outweighed his fear. "Just a little further," he said. "We've almost reached the center." The others exchanged uneasy glances but followed. The deeper they went, the more the tunnel changed. The floor grew damp, the ceiling dripped steadily, and faint fog began to form near their feet. Every sound, every breath came back louder, multiplied by unseen walls. At one point, Riku kicked something metallic. It rolled across the floor with a hollow clink. When Haruka shone the light on it, They realized it was part of an old school bus mirror, cracked and rusted. Its reflective surface was just intact enough to catch their faces, and for a brief, unnerving moment, Haruka swore she saw a fifth reflection standing behind them. She gasped and spun around. Nothing, only darkness. "What is it?" Daisuke asked, stepping closer. "Someone was behind us," she said, her voice unsteady. "I saw it in the glass." Riku chuckled nervously. "Your own shadow." But the laughter didn't last. The air shifted suddenly colder, sharper. A faint, electric buzz filled the tunnel, followed by a long, metallic creak, as though something heavy had moved in the distance. Then came the voice. It was faint at first, a child's voice, echoing through the static hum of their equipment. None of them could tell where it came from. It sounded like it was right beside them, and yet far away at the same time. "Sensei, is the bus coming?" Kana froze. Her flashlight trembled in her hand. Did you hear that?" No one spoke. The voice repeated, soft, trembling, and unmistakably close this time. "Sensei, it's dark. I can't see." Haruka screamed, dropping the camera. The device hit the ground, its screen flashing as the live chat filled with confused comments. Daisuke picked it up quickly, the feed still rolling. The image was shaky now, but one detail stood out in the corner of the frame. A small, shadowy figure, standing several meters behind them, motionless. "Riku, is someone there?" Daisuke whispered. Riku turned his light toward the shape, but as the beam hit the spot, there was nothing. Only the damp tunnel floor, empty and cold. "Let's go back," Kana said firmly. "Now." But Daisuke was drawn to something just ahead. On the tunnel wall, illuminated faintly by their flashlights, were several faded photographs pressed under layers of dirt and grime. Old, black and white school portraits, children in uniforms, smiling at the camera. Someone had glued them there long ago, their edges curling with age. As they stared, the faint humming began again. This time the tune was clearer, a childish song, the kind sung during long bus rides. The lyrics were too muffled to understand, but the melody carried a deep sadness, looping endlessly. Haruka whispered, "They were the ones on that bus, weren't they?" No one answered. Then, without warning, every flashlight flickered once, twice, and went out. Total darkness swallowed them whole. The only light came from Haruka's phone, its dim screen barely glowing through static. The chat continued to move. "We can't see anything." "What happened?" "Something's behind you." Daisuke raised the camera, scanning the black void. "Stay calm," he said, his voice trembling. "We just need to—" A deafening crash erupted from behind them, like metal twisting under pressure. The sound echoed down the tunnel, followed by the sharp hiss of steam. Everyone screamed. When Haruka managed to turn her flashlight back on, they saw it a set of old, rusted bus seats lying across the tunnel floor, as if ripped out of the wall itself. Each seat was covered in mud and streaked with black handprints. Kana backed away, crying, "This isn't right," she whispered. "It's like the accident never ended." The tunnel fell silent again, except for the steady dripping of water from above. Daisuke swallowed hard, his voice barely audible. "We keep filming," he said, though his hands were shaking. "If this is real, people need to see it." Haruka turned the camera back on him, her eyes wide with fear. "Daisuke, what if it's watching us right now?" For the first time, he didn't have an answer. The next few minutes unfolded like a fever dream, silent, heavy, and disjointed. The air inside Tunnel 9 no longer felt like ordinary air. It pressed against their lungs, thick and cold, as though the tunnel itself was breathing. The smell of burnt rubber had grown stronger, mixed with something sour, like decayed flowers. Haruka tried reconnecting the live stream. The signal stuttered, then burst back online for a moment. The comments immediately flooded the screen. "We saw someone! Behind the tall guy!" A child just moved past the camera. Haruka's hands shook so badly she almost dropped the phone again. Riku forced a laugh, his voice cracking. "Okay, we've got our ghost sighting. Let's go home." But when he turned toward the exit, he froze. The mouth of the tunnel where they had entered was gone, swallowed by darkness. It wasn't just that the light no longer reached that far. It looked as if the tunnel had stretched, growing longer behind them. Daisuke lifted his flashlight and aimed it toward the direction they came from. The beam faded halfway down, eaten by blackness. He took a cautious step forward. "It's fine," he said, forcing a steady tone. "Maybe it's just the curve." But Kana grabbed his arm. "Listen," she whispered. From behind them, faint and rhythmic, came the sound of footsteps, small, quick, and perfectly even. It wasn't an echo of their own movement. It was a pattern that matched nothing human. Riku shouted, "Who's there?" His voice echoed back, distorted and delayed, as if the tunnel were mocking him. Then the sound stopped. For a heartbeat, there was only the drip of water and the weak hum of Haruka's phone. Then a different sound emerged, the faint static buzz of a radio transmission. Haruka glanced down at her live stream app. The signal bar flashed erratically, and through the speaker came a voice so faint it almost blended with the static. "Don't! Stop! Keep! Moving!" Daisuke's blood went cold. "Did you hear that?" Haruka stared at the screen. The chat froze, then glitched, replaced by a single repeating message. "It's not safe to stay." "Is someone messing with us?" Riku said, though his voice trembled. Kana shook her head. "No one could connect out here. We're in the middle of the mountains." The voice came again, louder now. "Turn. Around." Everyone looked back at once. For a moment, nothing was there, just thick fog rolling through the tunnel like breath. Then, between the mist, a faint silhouette appeared. Small, motionless, wearing what looked like an old-style school uniform. The figure's head tilted slightly, as if studying them. Kana covered her mouth. "That's a little girl." The flashlight flickered, and in the blink of an eye, the figure was gone. Riku muttered a curse under his breath. "We're leaving. Now." They started walking quickly toward what they thought was the exit, their footsteps echoing in strange, overlapping rhythms. But with each step, the tunnel seemed to change. The walls, once gray and concrete, now appeared stained with shapes, faint outlines of faces, as if trapped beneath the surface. The deeper they walked, the stronger the vibration in the air became, like the hum of a distant engine. And then came a low rumble. At first, Daisuke thought it was thunder, but the sound grew, metallic and grinding, as headlights, impossibly bright, flared deep within the tunnel ahead. The light wavered, flickering like fire through fog, and a gust of air rushed past them, carrying with it the smell of exhaust and burning fabric. Haruka screamed, shielding her face. "It's the bus," she cried. "It's coming." A shadow of a large vehicle began to take shape in the haze. Not solid, but shimmering, like a mirage of something replaying itself endlessly. They could see faint outlines of windows, shapes of passengers inside silhouettes of children staring forward, unmoving. The bus roared closer, headlights bearing down, but before it could reach them, the vision blinked out, leaving only silence and the echo of screeching tires. The group stood frozen, hearts pounding. Then a new sound broke through, soft, almost delicate, the tinkling of a small bell. Kana turned toward the noise, and her flashlight caught movement to her right. A small offering box sat on a cracked ledge, half buried in dust, with a rusted bell tied to a faded red string. It swayed gently, though there was no wind. Daisuke crouched down beside it. There was something written on the wood, a message carved roughly by hand. He wiped the dirt away and squinted at the faint characters. They never left. His breath caught in his throat. "This was put here after the crash," he murmured. Haruka shook her head. "How could you know?" "Because," Daisuke said, voice trembling, "the date's 1986, same year as the accident. Before anyone could speak, the bell stopped moving. The air grew unbearably still, like the moment before an explosion. Then, one by one, every flashlight blinked out again, not flickering this time, but dying completely. They were plunged into pitch blackness. Somewhere behind them, a child's voice whispered, clear and close, "We can't find our way home." Haruka dropped the phone again. The live stream kept recording, capturing their ragged breathing and the soft shuffle of footsteps circling them. "Who's there?" Riku shouted again, his voice cracking with panic. "Stop it! Show yourself!" No answer, just the sound of something dragging lightly across the concrete, tracing a slow, deliberate path around them. And then, faintly, a new sound, distant, but rising, the wail of an approaching siren, echoing from outside the tunnel. Kana's eyes widened. "It's the rescue signal," she whispered. "The one they said they heard, right before the crash." Daisuke looked toward the darkness, trying to see through it. The sound of the siren grew louder, closer, and yet it carried no sense of salvation, only dread. Because the siren wasn't coming to save anyone. It was replaying a memory that had never ended. The siren wailed louder, echoing through the tunnel walls until it no longer sounded mechanical. It began to twist, bending into something human. A scream. 100 screams layered together, rising and falling like a tide of agony trapped inside the stone. The group instinctively backed against the wall, flashlights dead, the only light coming from the faint red glow of Haruka's phone still recording. "Daisuke!" Kana's voice cracked as she reached for him. "We have to get out!" But Daisuke stood frozen. His eyes were wide, reflecting the pulsing red glow. The tunnel around them was shifting. The air itself rippled, bending the space like heat waves over asphalt. Slowly, the gray concrete walls began to peel away, revealing something else beneath black scorch marks, twisted metal, and the faint outline of shattered glass windows. It was no longer just a tunnel. They were standing inside the remnants of a wreck. The ground tilted, and Kana lost her balance. Her hand touched something slick. She pulled it back and gasped. It was warm, sticky, and smelled faintly of oil mixed with copper. Haruka's trembling light caught a glimpse of it, a dark streak smeared along the floor that led toward a half-buried metal frame. Riku stumbled backward. "This isn't real. This isn't—" His words were drowned out by the screech of tires. The sound exploded through the space, deafening, and then for a split second they were surrounded by blinding light. The smell of gasoline and burning rubber filled their lungs. The tunnel wasn't empty anymore. Figures appeared through the haze. Dozens of them. Small forms, motionless at first, then swaying gently as though caught in slow motion. The outlines of school uniforms were unmistakable navy skirts, white shirts, shoulder bags. The figures stood in a line across the tunnel, blocking the path forward. Their faces were hidden in shadow, but every pair of shoes faced the group perfectly aligned, perfectly still. Haruka whimpered, holding up the camera. The lens trembled as she zoomed in. "Oh my God, they're all—" The figures began to move, heads tilted. Shoulders turned slightly, jerking like broken puppets. One by one, their faces lifted into the light. Each child had hollow, dark eyes, not sockets, but pools of pure black, absorbing the flashlight's beam instead of reflecting it. Riku let out a strangled cry. "Stop filming! Stop filming!" He grabbed Haruka's wrist, trying to pull the phone down, but she resisted, whispering, "People need to see this." Then one of the figures, a small girl in the front row, took a step forward. Her movements were unnatural, like time was skipping between frames. Her mouth twitched, opening slightly, and when she spoke, her voice layered over itself, like a recording warped by decades of replay. "Sensei, where is the bus?" The question hung in the air, trembling. Kana covered her ears, tears streaming down her face. "Please stop. Please." Daisuke tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "They don't know. They're gone." The girl's head tilted again, her hair falling over one eye. The others behind her began whispering, their words overlapping a chorus of lost children, calling for their teacher, their parents, their home. The tunnel began to pulse with the sound, vibrations rattling through the floor. The group turned and ran, but the tunnel stretched endlessly now. The entrance remained out of reach, no matter how far they ran. The floor beneath them slickened as though coated in oil. Haruka stumbled and fell, the phone flying from her hand, skidding across the concrete. Its screen caught a final, fleeting image before flickering dozens of small figures chasing behind them, feet dragging, faces twisted into shapes that blurred between grief and rage. "Move!" Riku shouted, pulling Haruka up. They sprinted around a curve that hadn't been there before, panting, trembling. Then silence. The air went dead still again. They had entered a part of the tunnel none of them recognized. The walls here were lined with objects, school bags, shoes, ribbons, notebooks, all water-damaged, and arranged neatly as though someone had been collecting them. Daisuke's breath came out in sharp bursts. He crouched near one of the bags, brushing away the dust. There was a name tag still attached. Sakurai Miho, Class 3, B. He swallowed hard. That was one of the students from the crash. Riku took a step back. "We shouldn't be touching anything." Before Daisuke could respond, the sound of dripping water returned, but it wasn't water this time. The droplets were rhythmic, hollow, metallic, the kind that echoed inside a broken vehicle frame. The faint red light from Haruka's phone illuminated the curve of metal embedded in the wall, the remains of a bus door. Kana whispered, "This is where it happened." Then movement. The door creaked open by itself, slow and deliberate. The hinges screamed against the silence. Inside the dark opening, a single figure sat in one of the half-buried seats. Not a child. Taller. Shoulders slumped. The silhouette of an adult. Daisuke stepped closer, trembling. "Who's there?" The figure shifted, and for a moment the beam of light caught the reflection of a pair of glasses. The face was half-burned, the skin cracked like dried clay. When it finally turned toward him, the voice that came out was low and broken. They were waiting for me. It was a man's voice, weary, hollow, filled with regret. "The driver," Haruka whispered. The figure's head twitched toward her. "They wouldn't stop singing," it murmured. "Even when the smoke came, even when I couldn't see." The voice cracked. "I tried to turn back, but the light, it wasn't daylight. It was them." And then he smiled, a slow, unnatural stretch that split his charred skin and vanished. The tunnel trembled violently, dust raining from above. The bus door slammed shut with a metallic bang, echoing endlessly. The air turned icy, and just before the red light of Haruka's phone died for good, they heard one last voice, a soft whisper that brushed past their ears like a breeze. "Don't follow the light. It's still burning." The tunnel fell silent, and for the first time Daisuke realized they hadn't been exploring a haunted place. They were inside the memory of the crash itself, replaying endlessly, and it was finally starting to notice them. The world around them seemed to shift again, collapsing in on itself. The distant siren faded into a long, hollow moan, and the air inside Tunnel 9 grew unbearably heavy, as though the mountain itself was pressing down, suffocating everything inside. Daisuke clutched the wall to steady himself, but even the wall no longer felt like stone. It pulsed beneath his palm, alive, trembling faintly, as if something deep within it was trying to breathe. Haruka stumbled beside him, coughing. We have to get out," she whispered. Her phone was still recording, its battery almost drained, the screen flashing with static. The live-stream chat was a blur of panicked messages, though none of them made sense anymore, rows of distorted letters, symbols, and the same repeated phrase in Japanese. "Bring them back!" Kana clung to Riku's arm, sobbing softly. "It's not a haunting," she said through tears. "It's a memory. It's looping, over and over." Riku shook his head violently. "No, it's more than that. Memories don't talk. They don't—" He stopped suddenly, staring down at the ground. In the thin glow of the dying light, the floor of the tunnel rippled like water. Beneath the translucent surface, shapes began to move, faint outlines of faces, mouths opening and closing silently. Daisuke crouched, transfixed, as one of them rose just enough for its features to come into focus. A small girl with short hair. Her lips formed words he couldn't hear. Then, faintly, her voice surfaced not through the air, but directly inside his head. "We didn't mean to stay." Daisuke jerked back, breathing hard. "They're trapped here," he said. "The crash. It didn't just kill them. It bound them." Haruka's voice trembled. "Bound them to what?" Before he could answer, the tunnel lights, long dead for decades, flickered on all at once. A blinding row of fluorescent bulbs illuminated the passageway, but instead of clean white light, they glowed a deep amber, like fire trapped behind glass. And for the first time, the tunnel looked whole again. No cracks, no mold. The walls gleamed with fresh paint. The ground was clean. And from somewhere up ahead came the echo of laughter, light, carefree, human. Kana gasped. "We've gone back." Down the corridor, a bright yellow bus appeared, its headlights cutting through the smoke. The number on the side read, Route 9, Shizuoka Field Trip. Through the windows, they could see children waving at the camera, singing and laughing. Daisuke's body went cold. He realized what they were seeing. It wasn't a haunting anymore. It was the moment before the accident. The bus slowed as it approached the bend in the tunnel. The driver, the same man they'd seen moments earlier, his face now whole and alive, glanced toward a small mirror hanging from the dashboard. His expression changed subtly, shifting from concentration to unease. Haruka whispered, "He sees something." In the mirror's reflection, a shadow moved across the road, faint but unmistakable. A figure standing in the middle of the tunnel, holding something in its hand. The driver slammed the brakes. The sound of screeching tires tore through the air, reverberating through the tunnel walls. Children screamed. The bus veered violently, its headlights spinning across the walls like blinding suns. Then, impact. The sound was so loud, so visceral, that the group instinctively covered their ears. When the light faded, the bus lay in ruin once again. Smoke filled the air. The children were silent. The tunnel returned to its present state, cracked, cold, and dark. Daisuke's knees gave out. "That's what happened," he whispered. "They weren't supposed to die here. Something appeared in front of them. Something that made the driver swerve." Kana looked up, her face pale. "A figure?" He nodded slowly. "The same one we saw. The girl." The realization spread through them like ice. The spirit haunting the tunnel wasn't one of the victims. She was something else entirely. A lure, a catalyst. Haruka's voice broke the silence. Then why? Why show us this? Before anyone could answer, the tunnel lights flickered again. At the far end, the silhouette of the little girl appeared, her figure faint against the darkness. This time, she wasn't still. She was walking toward them, one slow, dragging step at a time. Her uniform was torn, her hair damp, and her eyes, those deep, endless black eyes, locked directly onto Daisuke. She stopped a few meters away and tilted her head slightly, just as before. Her voice was quiet but clear. "Sensei, you came back." Daisuke froze. "What?" The air seemed to shift around him. The others turned to look, confusion mixed with fear. The girl took another step forward, her shoes scraping the ground. "You promised we'd be safe." Riku backed away, shaking his head. "What is she talking about?" Daisuke's face drained of color. I don't know." But somewhere, deep in his mind, a fragment surfaced a news article he had read while researching the tunnel weeks earlier. The bus crash had been attributed to driver error, but witnesses mentioned something else. The trip had been organized by a local university. One of the student volunteers, a teaching assistant, had withdrawn last minute after a scheduling conflict. His name was Daisuke Hayama. He realized it then, the same name as his. Haruka whispered, "It's you. She thinks you're him." The girl's voice grew louder, echoing off every wall. "You left us." The floor vibrated violently, dust cascading from the ceiling. Behind the girl, the other children began to appear again, dozens of them, forming a semicircle, their faces blank, their eyes black voids. Their voices joined hers, a chorus of sorrow and accusation. "You left us! You left us! You left us!" Kana screamed, covering her ears. Riku pulled her backward, shouting for Daisuke to move, but he couldn't. His legs wouldn't respond. The girl reached out her hand, her expression shifting from sadness to fury. "You brought others. You brought them back to burn with us." Haruka lunged forward, grabbing Daisuke's arm. "We're leaving!" The tunnel lights exploded, plunging everything into darkness once more, and then silence. When Daisuke opened his eyes again, the figures were gone. The tunnel was empty. Only the faint smell of smoke lingered in the air, along with the soft echo of a child's voice whispering, "The light never went out." He looked down. The floor beneath him was covered in ash, and pressed into it, faint but unmistakable, were small handprints leading deeper into the darkness. The realization hit him like a wave. The children weren't haunting the tunnel. They were still trapped in the moment before the fire. The light they saw wasn't from the outside world. It was the fire that never stopped burning. For a moment, everything was silent again. The tunnel still, the air thick, the world frozen between two breaths. Daisuke could hear his own heartbeat, fast and uneven, echoing inside his skull. The smell of ash hung heavy, mixed with that same metallic scent that had followed them from the start. Haruka stood beside him, her flashlight trembling in her hand, its beam barely cutting through the lingering smoke. Kana and Riku clung to each other near the wall, eyes wide, too afraid to speak. Then, faintly, from somewhere deep inside the tunnel, came the sound of footsteps. Not running this time, walking. Slow, deliberate, like someone pacing through water. Daisuke turned his light toward the noise, but the beam reached only a few meters before fading into black. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice hoarse. No answer, only the soft crunch of gravel. Then another sound followed, faint, echoing, metallic. It was the familiar chime of a bell, the same one that had hung from the offering box earlier. Haruka swallowed hard. "We should go," she whispered. They began moving toward what they hoped was the exit, their footsteps hurried but quiet. The tunnel stretched endlessly again, the air colder with every step. But then, just as they turned the final bend, a dim light appeared ahead, natural light. Faint, bluish, like the world beyond. They ran toward it, desperate, lungs burning. When they finally stumbled out into the open night, the stars above Yamanashi were hidden behind clouds. Their car was still parked where they'd left it. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Riku broke the silence. "We made it," he said, his voice trembling. Haruka lifted her phone. The battery was dead, but the screen flickered once before, shutting off completely. For a split second, an image flashed across it, the tunnel entrance behind them, and standing just inside it, a small girl in a school uniform, staring directly into the lens. The screen went black. Kana whispered, "She followed us out." Daisuke turned slowly toward the tunnel. The entrance was empty, but from deep within, carried faintly on the wind, came the soft sound of children singing a cheerful, innocent tune, echoing from a place no living voice should reach. And then one final whisper brushed past his ear, almost tender, almost relieved. "Sensei, the bus is here." The events surrounding Tunnel 9 were only the beginning. Across Asia, stories like these surface again and again, moments where the veil between the living and the dead seems to thin, and ordinary people find themselves caught in something they can't explain. From the silent mountains of Yamanashi to the humid backroads of the Philippines, these encounters share one thing in common. They begin with an accident and end with a haunting. Our next story takes us far from Japan, to a quiet village in Bulacan, where a late-night tricycle ride turned into one of the most chilling viral mysteries in recent years, a story locals still whisper about every All Saints' Day. This is the paranormal accident of Barangay San Roque. One story done, and one to go. I hope you liked the stories so far. When I make these long videos, there are nights where I stay up really late working on them. Tomorrow, I will be uploading another video. If you don't want to miss it, please subscribe. It's free, and it would help my channel get some recognition for daily posting. Thank you. It was the evening of the 31st of October 2017, the night before All Saints' Day, when Joel Santiago, a tricycle driver from Barangay San Roque, began his last round for the night. The air was warm, thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth and burning candles from the nearby cemetery. For most people in the village, this was a sacred time. Families gathered at the graves of their loved ones, lighting candles, offering food, whispering prayers to the dead. But for drivers like Joel, it was just another night to earn a few extra pesos. He'd been driving that route for nearly 15 years through narrow roads lined with coconut trees, past rice paddies that shimmered under the moonlight, and around the old San Roque Cemetery, where the road curved sharply before disappearing into the dark. The locals called that stretch Dang Patay, the Road of the Dead, partly because it ran beside the cemetery, but mostly because strange things had happened there for as long as anyone could remember. Joel never believed those stories. He was a practical man, not easily spooked. He had heard about drivers who claimed to have seen ghostly processions near the cemetery, faint lights floating across the road, the white silhouettes walking in silence. But he always dismissed them as tricks of the fog or too much gin bulag after work. He told himself ghosts didn't pay the bills. So that night, when his last passenger waved him down near the plaza, he didn't hesitate. It was only a short ride, just past the cemetery bend. As they drove, the rain started again, a soft drizzle that tapped lightly against the tricycle's plastic windshield. The headlights flickered every few seconds, cutting through the mist and revealing the crooked gravestones on the other side of the fence. His passenger, a woman in her 40s carrying flowers, sat quietly in the back, clutching her bag close. She said she was visiting her husband's grave before the crowds arrived in the morning. Joel nodded politely, keeping his eyes on the road. The village streetlights were few and far between. Every 100 meters, there was nothing but darkness. The only sound was the hum of the tricycle's small engine and the occasional bark of a distant dog. When they reached the cemetery's curve, Joel slowed down instinctively. The road was slick, and he knew from experience how easily tires could skid on this stretch. That was when the first strange thing happened. The woman in the back suddenly gasped and gripped the side of the seat. "Kuya, did you see that?" she whispered. Joel frowned. "See what?" She didn't answer, only pointed ahead. Through the thin veil of rain, something shimmered on the road, a pale, translucent figure standing just beyond the curve. For a moment, Joel thought it was a person crossing, maybe someone carrying a candle. But the light didn't move like a flame. It floated, bending the air around it. He blinked, trying to focus. The figure seemed to dissolve and reform, its outline too faint to be real, like a reflection with no source. The headlights flickered again, and when they came back, the figure was gone. Joel exhaled sharply, forcing a laugh to steady his nerves. "Probably fog," he muttered. The woman didn't laugh. She looked pale, her eyes fixed on the empty road ahead. "That wasn't fog," she said quietly. "That was a kalulua." Joel didn't answer. He just drove faster. A few minutes later, they reached her stop, a small house beside a mango tree, half hidden behind a row of candles glowing along the roadside. She handed him her fare without a word and disappeared into the gate. Joel sat there for a moment, the engine idling, the rain drumming softly on the roof. The road back to the terminal was empty now, completely dark except for the faint orange glow from the cemetery candles behind the fence. He hesitated, staring at the curve ahead. For the first time in years, he felt something he couldn't explain, not fear exactly, but a deep unease, as if the air itself was watching him. Still, he shook his head and pressed the accelerator. It was just another road. Just another night. He had no idea that within the next few minutes, the entire barangay would be talking about what happened to him, and that by morning, his name would be all over social media, attached to one of the strangest accidents ever caught on camera. Joel's tricycle rumbled down the narrow asphalt road, the sound of the engine fading into the steady rhythm of rain against metal. The drizzle had turned into a fine mist now, blurring the outlines of everything around him. Trees, fences, even the edge of the cemetery wall. He turned off the radio to listen to the hum of the night, something he often did when driving alone. It made him feel less disconnected from the world, as though the road itself could guide him. But tonight, the silence carried a strange weight, thick and uneven, as if the air had forgotten how to move. As he passed the cemetery bend again, Joel noticed something odd. The candles placed along the graves earlier were still burning, but instead of flickering randomly, they seemed to pulse all at once, in rhythm, like a heartbeat of light. He slowed down, squinting through the fog. The pattern was too precise to be natural. A chill crept up his neck, but he brushed it off. "Wind lang yan," he muttered. Just the wind. Then, from somewhere in the darkness, came the faint sound of footsteps. Not the quick, uneven steps of someone walking on gravel. These were soft, steady, and synchronized. Joel leaned forward, peering into the fog ahead, but the road appeared empty. He tapped the brakes, his headlights cutting through the mist, and for a moment, he thought he saw something faint silhouettes moving across the road. They looked human, yet transparent, like the outline of people seen through frosted glass. He blinked hard. When he opened his eyes again, the shapes were gone. He exhaled, shaking his head. "You're tired, Joel. Just tired." He laughed nervously, trying to chase away the unease creeping into his chest. But even as he spoke, he realized the tricycle's headlights had dimmed again, flickering weakly like a candle about to die. The engine coughed. Joel frowned and tapped the gas pedal, but the vehicle sputtered in protest. He looked at the fuel gauge, still half full. The dashboard lights flickered once, then went completely dark. The tricycle coasted for a few seconds before stalling in the middle of the road, right across from the cemetery gates. "Hey, Naku," he muttered, turning the key again. The engine groaned but refused to start. Rain pattered harder against the roof, and in the dim glow of his dying headlights, Joel caught sight of the rusted gate, just a few meters away. It was open. He froze. That gate had always been locked at night. Everyone in San Roque knew that. The caretaker, Mang Oscar, closed it before sunset and left the key with the barangay office. Yet now it stood ajar, creaking slightly as the wind passed through. Joel stepped out of the tricycle, his sandals sinking into the wet gravel. "Mang, Oscar?" he called out, his voice trembling more than he expected. No answer. Only the soft drip of water and the hum of insects. He pulled out his phone, intending to use the flashlight, but the screen refused to turn on. Dead battery. He looked back at his tricycle, its headlight flickered weakly. One last pulse of light before fading completely, leaving him in darkness. Then, from the other side of the gate, came a sound that made his blood run cold. Children laughing. It wasn't loud, but it was clear. A handful of voices, cheerful and playful, echoing faintly from within the cemetery. The sound shouldn't have been there. No one visited at this hour. And the laughter wasn't distant. It was moving, weaving between the tombstones, getting closer. Joel's first instinct was to run back into the tricycle and lock himself inside, but his legs wouldn't move. He stood rooted in place, his heart pounding, staring into the pitch-black cemetery as the laughter slowly changed. It grew slower, deeper, until it no longer sounded like laughter at all, more like breathing. Then, something small and pale emerged from the fog. At first, Joel thought it was a stray dog. The figure was crouched low, crawling on all fours near the cemetery fence. But as it moved closer, the shape became clearer, too thin, too human. The thing stopped right at the edge of the road, just a few meters from him. Its skin shimmered faintly in the moonlight, almost translucent. Joel squinted, his breath catching in his throat. It was a child. A girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, wearing a white dress. Her head was tilted slightly to one side, her long hair sticking to her face from the rain. "Hey, are you lost?" Joel asked softly, forcing the words out. The child didn't answer. She stood slowly, her movements stiff and uneven, like a puppet being lifted by invisible strings. Joel took a cautious step backward. "Your parents must be looking for you," he said, trying to sound calm. Then she looked up, and Joel's breath stopped. Where her face should have been, there was nothing, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, just a smooth, pale surface, glistening under the rain. He stumbled backward, his hand slamming against the side of the tricycle. His pulse thundered in his ears. The faceless girl tilted her head again, as if studying him. The rain around her began to glow faintly, like mist lit by candlelight. Joel jumped into his tricycle and turned the key again, praying it would start. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life with a violent jolt. He didn't think he just slammed his foot on the accelerator. The tires spun against the wet road before gripping, and the tricycle lurched forward. He didn't look back. But as he sped past the bend, he caught one last glimpse in the rearview mirror, the gate swinging shut by itself, the faint glow of candles flickering wildly, and behind the cemetery fence, dozens of pale figures standing perfectly still, watching him leave. Joel's hands shook as he gripped the handlebars. The road stretched endlessly ahead, but somehow he couldn't shake the feeling that something was following him unseen, silent, and waiting for him to slow down. Joel's tricycle tore through the night, its small engine rattling under the strain. The rain came harder now, hitting the windshield like 1,000 tiny stones. His hands gripped the handlebars so tightly his knuckles turned white. Every instinct screamed at him to keep driving, to not stop, not look back, not think. But no matter how far he went, the air around him still carried that same cold heaviness, like the presence that had watched him from the cemetery hadn't been left behind. When he finally slowed down near the barangay outpost, he was shaking so badly he could barely shift gears. He parked under the flickering streetlight outside a small sari-sari store, its owner, ailing Mercy, just about to close up for the night. She turned when she saw him stumble out of the tricycle, drenched, gasping, eyes wide with panic. "Joel? Ay naku, ano nangyari sa'yo?" she asked, rushing over. He struggled to find words. I almost hit someone. A kid. No face. She just stood there." Ailing Mercy frowned, her expression shifting from concern to fear. "You passed by the cemetery again, didn't you?" Joel hesitated, then nodded. She glanced toward the direction of the road, her face pale. "You shouldn't have driven there tonight," she said softly. "Not on Kaluluwa Eve." Joel wiped the rain from his face, still breathing hard. "What do you mean?" Ailing Mercy crossed herself. "That's when they walk the Kaluluwa. The souls visit their families before returning to their graves at midnight. You shouldn't cross their path." Joel shook his head. "That's just superstition. What I saw, it wasn't a soul, it was—" Before he could finish, a sudden noise cut through the air, a faint metallic clatter from behind him. They both turned. The tricycle's front wheel was spinning slowly, though no wind blew. Joel's heart dropped as the vehicle gave a soft creak, like something had brushed past it. Then came the smell, a faint, sweet odor, like burning candles mixed with wilted flowers. Ailing Mercy's eyes widened. "Joel," she whispered, "you brought something with you." He backed away instinctively, staring at his tricycle. The reflection on its wet metal side showed faint streaks of white-like handprints, small, delicate, child-sized. Before he could react, a sharp voice came from across the street. "Hey, what are you two doing there?" It was Officer Ramirez, one of the barangay tanids, returning from patrol. His flashlight cut across the road, illuminating Joel's tricycle and the wet pavement around it. "Joel, what's the problem?" Joel hesitated. "Sir, I think someone ran across the road near the cemetery. I tried to avoid them, but—" Ramirez interrupted with a short laugh. "You too, huh? Every year someone says that. It's always the same story." He pointed his flashlight toward the tricycle. "Let me see." As the beam hit the vehicle, both men froze. The passenger seat was soaked, but not from rain. The liquid glistened darker, thicker. Ramirez crouched down, touching it with his fingers. He frowned. "This isn't water." Joel's stomach turned. Ramirez wiped his hand on his uniform, sniffing cautiously. "Smells like candle wax. But where would that come from?" Before anyone could answer, the streetlight above them flickered violently, casting long shadows across the road. The faint buzz of electricity turned into a sharp crackle. Then Joel's tricycle engine started on its own. The ignition key was still in his pocket, yet the engine sputtered, rattled, then roared to life. The headlights turned on, illuminating the empty stretch of road leading back toward the cemetery. Ramirez shouted, "Turn it off!" "I can't!" Joel yelled, fumbling with the keyring. The tricycle's front wheel began to rotate. Again, slowly at first, then faster as if something unseen was forcing it forward. The faint scent of burning wax grew stronger. The sound of children laughing echoed faintly through the rain, distant but moving closer. Alling Mercy screamed, "It's them! The Kalulua parade!" Ramirez backed away, pointing his flashlight toward the road. "I don't see anything." But Joel did. In the beam of his headlights, faint silhouettes began to form, dozens of them, walking across the road in silence. They glowed faintly, like mist catching the light, their outlines soft but human. He could see their heads bowed, hands clasped as if in prayer. They moved in a straight line, heading toward the cemetery. His tricycle engine revved again, jerking forward violently before shutting off completely. The lights died. The road went black. Ramirez whispered, "What the hell was that?" Joel couldn't speak. He stared into the darkness, heart pounding. Then from somewhere far down the road came the faint sound of a bell. Not a church bell, but small, metallic, like the ones tied to candle wagons during All Saints' Day. It rang once, twice, then stopped. A sudden gust of cold air swept through the street, extinguishing the candles in front of the store. And then, for just a heartbeat, Joel saw it again, the faceless girl standing beside the open gate of the cemetery, watching him. Her head tilted slowly, her empty face reflecting the pale moonlight. Alling Mercy fell to her knees, murmuring prayers under her breath. Ramirez pulled out his radio, calling for backup, but only static answered. Joel couldn't move. The girl's smooth, blank face seemed to stretch faintly, as if trying to form a smile. Then she lifted her hand, small, pale, dripping with rain, and pointed directly at him. The streetlight above flickered one last time and went out. The moment the streetlight died, the world fell into absolute darkness. For a few seconds, all Joel could hear was rain and the rapid thudding of his heart. Then, faintly, from somewhere behind him, came the slow creak of metal. He turned toward the sound. His tricycle, unmoving just seconds ago, began to tremble, its wheels turning ever so slightly on their own, as if unseen hands were pushing it forward. Officer Ramirez raised his flashlight, but the beam flickered uselessly. "Joel," he whispered, "get away from that thing." But Joel couldn't move. The air around him had turned cold, colder than it should have been in the humid Philippine night. He could see his breath now, each exhale visible in the beam of the dying flashlight. The faint smell of wax and burnt flowers returned, thicker, choking, like incense lit for the dead. Then the tricycle's radio came to life, crackling, hissing, playing a voice that wasn't there before. It was a woman's voice, faint and distorted, singing an old Tagalog lullaby, the same kind of song played in cemeteries during candle offerings. The melody echoed through the empty street, sweet and hollow. Alling Mercy clutched her rosary and backed away toward her store. "That song," she whispered. "That's what they used to play in the procession years ago, the one after the accident." Joel turned to her, confused. "What accident?" But before she could answer, the flashlight beam caught something moving on the road, the silhouettes again. But this time, they weren't walking in a line. They surrounded the tricycle, slowly circling it, their faint forms flickering in and out like reflections in water. Officer Ramirez froze. "Those aren't people." Joel took a step back. His legs were trembling. The nearest figure turned its head, or what should have been its head, toward him. The rain passed through its body as though it weren't really there. It was neither solid nor shadow, something in between. And then the faceless girl appeared again. She stood at the center of the many circle, her small body illuminated by a faint glow that seemed to come from within her. Her white dress clung to her thin frame, soaked with rain. She tilted her head slowly toward Joel. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Ramirez stepped forward, raising his voice. "Hey, whoever's doing this, stop, now!" The girl's head snapped toward him, a sudden jerking motion, and the officer's flashlight shattered in his hand. Ramirez cried out, stumbling back. The shards of glass hit the ground, and for a moment, everything went pitch black again. Then the radio shifted frequencies, the lullaby turning into static. Out of the noise came a voice, a child's voice this time. "Kuya, Joel!" Joel froze. The voice was soft, trembling, but unmistakably real. "Kuya, Joel, why did you hit me?" He felt the world drop away beneath him. The voice was so close, it could have been whispering in his ear. "Who are you?" he managed to ask, his throat dry. The faceless girl tilted her head again. The glow around her pulsed faintly. "You didn't stop," the voice said. "You didn't see me." Ramirez grabbed Joel's arm. "We're leaving," he said sharply. "Now!" But as they turned, the road behind them was gone. The entire street had dissolved into darkness. The sari-sari store, the outpost, the streetlight all vanished. The world around them had shifted into something else. They stood in the middle of a wide open road, surrounded by faint lights, hundreds of candles stretching endlessly in both directions. The air shimmered with fog, and the smell of candle wax was suffocating. "This isn't real," Joel whispered. "This can't be real." Ailing Mercy was crying softly, clutching her rosary. "You're walking with them now," she said. "You're on their road." Joel looked around, panic rising. "What road?" Ramirez pointed ahead. "There! Look!" Through the mist, they saw a procession moving toward them. Figures dressed in white, holding candles, walking silently. Their feet didn't touch the ground. As they drew closer, their faces came into view, blank, hollow, featureless, yet somehow filled with sorrow. At the front of the procession walked the faceless girl. She held a small lantern that burned with an eerie blue flame. Behind her, the rest of the figures followed, forming an endless line stretching into the fog. The sound of the radio's static blended with the rain, creating a soft, rhythmic pulse like a heartbeat that belonged to something much older than any of them. Joel fell to his knees, trembling. "Please," he whispered. "I didn't mean to hit you. I didn't see—" The girl stopped. For the first time, she lifted her arm and pointed toward the cemetery beyond the fog. The blue flame in her lantern flickered. "You all see now," she said. "We never stopped walking." Then, in a single breath, the entire procession turned their heads toward Joel. Their faceless features glistened in the light of the flame, hundreds of them, staring without eyes. The candlelight around them flared, growing brighter, burning white. The wind howled, carrying the faint sound of chanting the same prayer, whispered by families during All Saints' Day. And in that blinding light, Joel saw for the briefest moment what really happened. The girl, standing in the middle of the road, the tires skidding, the crash, his tricycle flipping over, his head hitting the pavement, the sound of his own voice calling for help that never came. And then the light went out. They were back on the street. The rain still fell. The tricycle lay overturned beside the road. Joel was lying next to it, his body trembling, his face pale. Officer Ramirez and Ailing Mercy stood frozen. The headlights flickered once, and in their glow, they saw Joel's eyes open slowly. He whispered one thing before losing consciousness. She had no face, but she knew my name. When Joel woke up, the world was no longer white and glowing. He was lying in a hospital bed, his arm wrapped in bandages, a dull ache pulsing through his skull. The smell of disinfectant stung his nose. For a moment he couldn't remember where he was or what had happened. His thoughts were foggy, like fragments of a nightmare that refused to fade. Then he saw the tricycle key still hanging around his neck bent, burned along the edges, and everything came rushing back. The crash, the rain, the faceless girl. He sat up sharply, ignoring the pain, eyes darting around the room. It was quiet, except for the steady beep of a heart monitor. Outside, faint sunlight seeped through the window blinds. He was alive. But somehow, it didn't feel like survival. A nurse entered the room with a gentle smile. "Ah, you're awake. You've been unconscious for almost 2 days." Joel's throat was dry. What happened?" "You were found by the cemetery," she said softly. "Your tricycle overturned. You were lucky someone saw the lights flicker and called for help." Her tone changed slightly as she glanced at his chart. "You kept saying something before you passed out. Something about a child." Joel stared at her, uncertain if he should speak. "You wouldn't believe me," he muttered. The nurse gave a small, knowing smile. "This is San Roque, mister." "Santiago. We've heard every kind of story." Before he could reply, the door opened again. Officer Ramirez stepped inside, his uniform still damp from the drizzle outside. He looked exhausted. "Joel," he said, pulling a chair close to the bed. "We need to talk about what happened." Joel rubbed his temples. "Did you see her too, sir?" "The girl?" Ramirez hesitated. "I saw something," he admitted quietly, "but it doesn't make sense." He placed a small USB stick on the table. "That's from the CCTV camera at Alling Mercy's store. We reviewed it this morning." Joel's pulse quickened. "You got it on video?" Ramirez nodded slowly. "We got something." He handed Joel a small tablet from his bag and pressed play. The footage showed Joel's tricycle parked under the streetlight, just as he remembered. He could see himself and Ailing Mercy talking near the door. Then the light flickered, and the frame distorted briefly with static. And then a shape appeared. A translucent figure crossing the road from the cemetery gate, its outline faint and blurred as if made of mist. The tricycle lights flared at that exact moment. Joel could see himself flinch, turn, then vanish in a burst of static as the camera shook violently. The timestamp froze at 11:59 p.m., 1 minute before midnight. Ramirez paused the video. "That's all we got." After that, the feed cut out. Joel's hands trembled as he stared at the frozen frame. "That's her," he whispered. "That's the girl I saw." The officer nodded. "You're not the only one. We've had people talk about her for years. Some call her Ligaya, the spirit of a child who died on that road before the cemetery was even built." Joel looked up, confused. "Before?" Ramirez leaned back, sighing. "There used to be a small chapel there, long before San Roque became a barangay. During the war, refugees stayed in the area. There was a fire. Some say it started during an air raid. A few didn't make it out. One of them was a little girl, maybe 7 or 8. Every All Saints' Eve, people reported seeing lights along the road like a procession." "The Kalulua Parade," Joel murmured. Ramirez nodded. "They say the spirits pass through, returning to where they died. Most just cross and vanish, but hers stays, like she's waiting for something or someone." Joel looked at the video again. The faint outline of the girl shimmered against the dark road. Her head was tilted slightly, just like the night he saw her. She said my name. Joel whispered. The officer frowned. How would she know you? Joel didn't answer. He was staring past the video now, remembering something. The way she'd whispered, Kuya Joel. Why did you hit me? The way she'd said, you didn't stop. He turned to Ramirez. What if I wasn't the first one to see her? The officer hesitated. What are you saying? Joel swallowed hard. My father used to drive the same route. He was a tricycle driver, too. He died in an accident near that same curve when I was 10. Everyone said it was the rain, but my mother always said he swerved to avoid someone. The words hung heavy in the air. Ramirez leaned forward. You think she's connected to your father? Joel nodded slowly. I think she remembers him. And now, me. Before either of them could say more, a nurse appeared at the doorway. Sir, someone's here to see you, she said, looking uneasy. Joel frowned. Who? The nurse hesitated. She didn't give a name. Just said she wanted to return something you dropped. Joel exchanged a nervous glance with Ramirez. Let her in. The door opened slowly. A young woman stepped inside, her clothes slightly damp from the rain. She looked no older than her early 20s, her long black hair falling neatly over her shoulders. In her hand, she held something wrapped in a white handkerchief. You left this by the road, she said softly, placing it on the table beside his bed. It was his broken tricycle mirror cracked, the metal frame bent. Joel stared at it, frozen. Thank you, he managed to say. Were you there that night? The woman smiled faintly. I always am. Her voice was calm, almost soothing, but her words sent a chill down his spine. He blinked, and for a split second, her reflection appeared in the broken glass, not as she stood now, but as a faintly glowing silhouette in a white dress. Ramirez rose quickly, reaching for her, but she was already turning toward the door. When it closed, the hospital room fell silent again. Joel stared at the mirror. In the cracked glass, the faint outline of a child's face shimmered featureless, smooth, waiting. And from the hallway outside, carried softly through the wind, came the sound of tiny bells ringing. Joel sat in the hospital bed, staring at the broken tricycle mirror, his fingers tracing the jagged edges. The faint shimmer of the faceless child's reflection seemed to pulse, alive, even though the room was silent and still. His heart was pounding, but not from the crash. It was the knowledge that what he had seen, what he had hit, what had haunted him, was still out there, waiting, watching. Officer Ramirez cleared his throat. Joel, maybe you should take some rest, he said, uneasily glancing toward the door. Joel shook his head. Rest? His voice was hoarse, trembling. I don't know how to rest, knowing she's still out there. She knows my name. She knows me, and she won't stop. Alling Mercy stepped closer, wringing her hands. The Kalulua parade comes every year, she said softly. People say it's harmless, just wandering souls returning to their graves. But some get angry when you see them, or when you interfere. Joel swallowed hard, remembering the girl standing in the middle of the road, her head tilted, her empty face gazing directly at him. The nurse appeared again, hesitating at the door. Mr. Santiago, the CCTV footage you asked about. Someone has been reviewing it online. People are talking. It went viral overnight. Joel felt a chill run down his spine. Viral. Everyone in the barangay. Everyone outside the barangay. Everyone would see what he had seen and speculate, and maybe, in doing so, draw more attention to her. He turned to the mirror again. The faint shimmer was gone. For a moment, relief flooded him. Then, almost imperceptibly, the reflection shifted. A small hand pressed against the glass from the inside, leaving a streak of condensation, and the outline of a head featureless, smooth tilted toward him once more. Joel's chest tightened. He realized, with a sinking feeling, that he didn't need to see her to know she was still there, that she could follow him anywhere, waiting for another road, another night, another driver. He looked at Officer Ramirez. I'm never driving at night again," he whispered. The officer nodded silently. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, carrying a faint, melodic chime. Somewhere, a procession moved along the road, unseen but felt. Joel knew then that the faceless girl and the souls of the Kalulua parade weren't just stories. They were memories, and memories that never let go. As the sun rose, casting pale light over Barangay San Roque, the hospital room was empty for a brief moment, save for the faint outline of a small handprint on the shattered tricycle mirror, pressed there from somewhere no one could reach. And in the distance, from the road leading past the cemetery, a soft flicker of candlelight danced, moving closer. I hope you enjoyed these stories. Tomorrow we will be uploading another terrifying story. Feel free to subscribe and put on your notifications to never miss another scary video. I upload almost every day. Wish you all the best.